My name's Friendly Phelps and I play shortstop and pitcher.
My name's Kennedy Antonio and I play second base.
My name's Chesney Robbins and I play second base.
Matt Robbins, and I was the head coach.
Matt, thank you. And congratulations, ladies, on your tournament down in San Bernardino. Is this all the young ladies? You probably have more.
We had more, but I think this is all that could make it.
Oh, okay.
So,
We'd like to get a picture if we could. So come on up.
yeah, for sure.
Middle child.
Thank you. And congratulations again. Good luck for next year.
Hey, Mayor, and is it true that both our Little League and our softball Little League were both state champs? Is that right? So that
Right.
both of them represented Utah right here out of
Right.
Washington.
Mhm.
It's pretty amazing. Way to go, everybody.
Thank you. Again, you're welcome to stay if you'd like. You can go home and watch paint dry. It might be a little easier. All right, to Brian Brown, financial review.
There we go. Mayor and council, this is each quarter we're required by the state to report a quarterly financial report. And so this covers the final quarter of the fiscal year and this covers April through June 21st to June 2021. And that's what Denise used to always tell me. Is that better? So with this, the fiscal year has concluded and we're preparing for our audit. So this is where we're now working on making the depreciation, posting depreciation and some of the final journal entries so we can prepare for the audit. So just to go over some of the key points with revenue, we'll start with revenue. This graph is the budget status. It is cumulative. What it shows is the revenue expenses by month for each month throughout the fiscal year. So you can see how it played out by each month. Now this is available. This was created by OpenGov, which is available on our financial on the WashingtonCity.org under finance. So you can, anyone can go into OpenGov and you can change this or filter or create different fields, drill into it. So if you ever want to look at that, that's where this is pulled from. And then this goes into more detail. So this will show for the last 3 years our revenue and expenses for all the funds. So you can kind of see the breakdown of how each fund is doing by revenue expense. Now this may change a little because like I said, we will accrue some revenues and expenses back. We're almost done with that, but we continue to look at the revenues and expenses till into August and make sure they don't, if they fit in this fiscal year, we accrue them back. So
Hey, Brian.
yeah.
So on 2019, is that the budget year that goes 2018 to 2019,
correct.
July 1 through June 30?
Correct. And then the next year would be 19 to 20 and then 20 to 21. I just put the ending.
Yeah.
So
is that how they typically refer to it, as the ending year?
That's how.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
That's what a lot of people would hyphenate it, but it just makes that graph bigger.
So these are just the budget year or the fiscal year numbers.
Yeah. So the next graph, I talked about sales tax in the briefing document, but the next graph I did not include because we did not get final sales tax numbers until yesterday for fiscal year 21. And so here's a 10-year history of sales tax. And the fiscal year 2021 ended up being about 25% more than 2020. And along with this, not only with sales tax, I talked about building permits. Last year was our highest building permit. We issued more building permits than ever in Washington City. And over the previous years, up about 35%. And RAP tax. So here's a summary of the RAP tax, what's been collected, the distributions and the balance. And so the total balance is the 1.1 million. And then the resolution, the 19-21, actually allocated 35% of the RAP tax to cultural facilities and arts. And that started in October, let's see, it was October 2019. We started doing the 35%. So of the 1.1, the 335,000 is allocated for that. And then the uncommitted is the 822,000 for
But
RAP tax.
Brian, didn't we just commit a whole bunch of these?
Yeah, that's with those other ones, that would be what you did in that last resolution would deduct from this.
Okay.
Isn't the 58? Okay, it's in addition to the 58,000 that's on there for
Those all the
2021.
ones you approve will hit fiscal year 22. These are actuals. So those were, we are working on cutting those checks and getting the documentation, and everything, so we can cut those checks. So whatever was approved will come off the 822.
Okay. So that's what we currently have. And then next year's summary will show the committed dollar amounts.
Yeah. And then one other key point or highlight is the community center. When we originally started this fiscal year, the community center, and I don't have a graph on this, but the community center took, the pandemic affected the community center the most. Their revenues were down the most in the first 2 quarters. And to actually look at the numbers and how they came out, they actually came out 8% above budget, which I didn't think they would be at that at year end. So their revenues were actually 8% higher, and they actually covered 64% of their expenses, which is right in line with what they've done in the past. So the result, they ended up better than I thought they would. And then this graph, just to briefly go over the golf course, the revenues and expenses, and this kind of gives a summary since 2011. This will be the first year golf course has ever covered 100% of their expenses. So the golf course had a really good year this year. And I'm just going to skip interest, not unless you want to know about it. So that's all about the revenue. Do you have any questions about revenues before I quickly jump in expenses? So the expenses, the general fund's budget was 27 million, and we have expensed 25 million. So they were at 91% of their budget. And as I said in the briefing document, the maintenance department was one of the only ones of the general fund that were over, and we're working on that. There was a cost allocation we need to actually do, and that should bring them down once we get that to where they're not so far out of budget. And then, like I said in the briefing document, all the other funds, the water, sewer, electric, irrigation, stormwater, I broke it out by operating versus non-operating, because it's easier to see. Some of those not operating we haven't posted, and also if there's capital projects haven't been done, we need to roll them over. But as far as operating goes, most of them were within that 80 to 90%. So the expenses are really easy. I mean, the general fund was at 91%. The rest are right at, they're operating right at 80 to 90%. So other than that, and what we're projecting, like I said, we had a stronger year than expected, and we're projecting fund balance to be around 28% at the end of this year. So that's pretty much covers this quarter. Do you have any questions regarding the financials quarterly?
Yeah, Brian, could I ask you this non-operating depreciation? Can you give just a quick overview of what that means?
So the non-operating depreciation. So anything over $50,000, we categorize in the county as a fixed asset. So we don't expense it all at once. So say it has a useful life of like 10 years. So we take it up and you say it's $100,000, we take and depreciate it each year by $10,000. So that way it streamlines expense. So you're not shoving $100,000. It breaks it off to the useful life of that asset. So these figures, with the fixed assets, we have so much in there. Every year we depreciate whatever we're on straight lines. So we just take the straight line depreciation.
So this is the facilities or whatever, like
Facilities,
for water.
cars, anything that's over $50,000.
anything over 50. Okay.
So, and we use straight lines. So we just take like a vehicle may have 7 years, a building maybe 40 years, and we just take whatever the total is and calculate that cost by year. And then our accounting system calculates that, and then we plug it in and calculate the depreciation. So yeah, straight line is easy to do. When you get into other depreciation methods, it gets really more complicated. It's easier to understand too.
And if you don't have this information in front of you, it's okay, but it seems like we're getting close to retiring the bond on the community center. You know, if we're getting close there or if we're done there, and we can talk about that later. I just was scrolling through and looking at debt services, and in the back of my mind, I knew we were getting close to.
I thought it was either this year or next year, and I cannot remember.
It's okay.
It's
okay,
really
Brian.
close on the community center. I know Solon Park's close as well. I'll check on those and send out an email.
That'd be good. If you could shoot an email out to the council, just letting us know on that. I'm sure we'd all be a little curious just to know when that debt service is up.
And I know it's really close, and that's easy to look up. I can look it up.
Do
And just,
do you know what other loans or bonds we still have outstanding? Are we paying on the police station still?
police station is still outstanding. And then there's a bond that was for, where's that?
I know we have the Coral Canyon bonds, but
That
those are
Coral-
kind of
and those come
different
out in, I
type.
think 2027.
Yeah, they were refunded and reissued a few years back to get a little better terms, and
And then there's about 4 other bonds, and I can send you a summary of all those.
yeah, that'd be good. Then on the golf course, did that drastic decline in expense in 2020, was that, did we finish off a lease on golf carts or something? I'm
So
trying to
they
remember what that
purchased
was.
New mowers.
Okay, they purchased
So-
the new mowers and then they were done paying on those or something.
They just straight out purchased them last year.
So how did it seems like you've answered this before, but how did the expense drop so drastically over a year?
Well, there was
Or was there
200
just a spike in expense when we bought the
there's a
mowers? and now
$200,000
it's-
purchase in mowers in 2020.
Okay, so the spike was up, not
Uh,
down. Okay, and that was a one-time purchase, and now we're back in the
And now we're back.
in the black.
So I looked at that, and that big spike is the purchase of lawnmowers.
So it was a spike up, not a spike down. Okay.
Yeah. Had that not been there, that spike would have been $2,000 less.
But it's good to know.
So we would have been at 14 million, 1.4 million, not the 1.6 that year. Which would have kept it more straight. So. Any other questions?
No additional questions? Thanks, Brian. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Rusty, Community Redevelopment Agency, CRA, local incentives, evaluation criteria discussion.
Okay, I had a little bit of technical difficulties right before, as you do. I'm going to see if I can do these. I have quite a few slides to go through. Be patient with me. And don't worry, you won't have to, a lot of this will be a review. So let's see. Good evening, Councilman and Mayor. This is just a review. In general, within the first few months, these are the things that I see as a priority for Washington City. This is a combination of both the strategic economic development plan and then also the city plan. So increasing the sales tax base, property tax base, and buying power through well-paying jobs. I'm hopeful that we can get that down to a little more, distill that down to a better policy and more specific. This is a reminder also that over the past 8 years, this is what our development has looked like in Washington City. That orange part again is residential. It's people adding a garage or swimming pool or something like that. So over the last 8 years, this is what our development has look like, which is obviously our residential is far outpacing our commercial development, which is why we made this a priority in the city.
Hey, Rusty, before we,
yes.
sorry, right here, just before we move on, what is a good balance on the commercial? Is it 25%, 30?
It depends. You want to look at the cost to service, and you don't want to include one-time costs. So our city is fiscally responsible because we can service, but as residents, as neighborhoods decline, as roads wear out, as residents would like to have more amenities, parks, things like as we increase in population, we need to add emergency services. We have to keep an eye on this. And as it gets increasingly difficult to even hire just in this market right now, this is an important thing to look at. So I can give some examples, but bedroom communities, the cost will come in increased property taxes. At some point, if we don't offset sales tax and other revenues for the city, then we're looking at increased property taxes. So there are bedroom communities, and this is just a philosophy of, what the residents want and how they want their city to run. This is economic development, the means to create other revenue streams aside from property taxes. So there's the effort here is to ease property taxes and ease increases on those.
I think what the councilman's asking is, and I might be wrong, but so is 98% residential and 2% commercial. Would you want to see that 5% commercial or 10% commercial? What's a more of a healthy balance?
That's a complicated question because it depends on the type of commercial. And we're actually going to go over some examples and some tools to bring in the type of commercial that would bring in higher revenues. So this commercial industrial isn't for every commercial industrial. That cost of service, there are types of commercial that are higher cost and that are lower cost. The same with residential as well. Usually the larger lots and more larger lot sizes for residential would push that cost of service higher, that you can't see because the thing is right over. I think it's, goodness, I can't even see it. It's $1.16. That's the average cost of service for residential. So, and that goes up as the lot sizes get larger and goes down as you get into apartments or multi-family housing. So these are just some general principles, and we can look into what our city looks like specifically and get some targets. And that will actually be part of the process that we go through as we define what we want to do for economic development. But here's some initial ideas.
Oh, I just wanted to ask while you're on that subject or while that's been asked. So in a general sense, residential property taxes would have to go up if we didn't have the commercial. And so we need to have that balance of commercial to prevent that from happening and provide the services that we provided throughout the city, whether it's parks, police, fire, so on.
Exactly. And then also cities that are in growth mode, they have a lot of residential coming in. The city can provide services, with impact fees and these one-time fees. I don't think we're in that situation though. I think we're sustaining on annual fees or fees that come in on a regular basis, going out on a regular basis, and impact fees are more one-time expenditures. So the city is really great with that so far, but as we expand and we want to offer more amenities or more services, it becomes increasingly important to start looking at things like this.
Can I make a quick comment?
Sure.
So I think the answer to your question is really hard because it's city dependent. and the city can decide how much commercial and how much residential and decide what mix we think is appropriate for us. Right now, it's really interesting the way that sales tax is divided between the state. You know, half of our sales tax goes to a state pool and then gets divided by population. So Brian and I look at that every month to see where are we compared to sort of the state average, and we have an average amount of commercial for the state, if that makes sense. So even though in the last 8 years, 98% of the growth has been in residential, Washington did a good job of growing our commercial at one point where we added Walmart and Home Depot and some of these larger commercial. And then we're also seeing sales tax come in from things like Amazon and online purchases that come even though there aren't brick and mortar in your community. So it's just kind of an interesting thing to look at that mix. But right now we're average with the rest of the communities in the state, but we think we could probably do a little bit better than that. And then not all of that is sales tax that's going to come in if we add, you know, industrial users. That doesn't necessarily drive that sales tax revenue, but it helps because they bring in other things like higher paying jobs and property tax revenue and things like that. Is that helpful?
Okay, so types of development. These are some options we have. The side is some of the benefits that you get from this. Obviously, retail, we want to provide goods and services to our residents within the community that they live in, so they have access to those. They're not going to other communities, or at least they have the option to get those goods and services within their own community, because that directly supports their service of residential. Sales tax revenues also offset that cost of community service, and that's where the sales tax and property tax, you find a balance there. And then it reduces traffic because we don't have people having to drive across town to get the goods and services. Some examples of this that have inspired some of the projects that are going on currently. We're just going to kind of go over those, and then we're going to talk about some of the tools that were used in these various projects. And then that's kind of a segue into what I wanted to really get deep into, which was, or at least give an overview of, which is the CRA and TIF and some of the tools that are utilized. So Farmington Station, this is a right off of a freeway exit. It's got a front runner track. There's office space. There's, I don't know if anybody's been to Farmington Station. It's near Lagoon. Great place for families to gather, shopping, and it's a great revenue source. And this was, all of these projects had some assistance as far as had a plan and had some tools to carry out that plan. So Grapevine Crossing is what was proposed at exit 13. I just had an update with Troy Belliston and Jason Birmingham for Grapevine Crossing. We looked at a redesign for that. And there's some tools that they're looking at for that area. And we'll go over those. When you look at, in terms of, you know, how to attract retail, or what is retail looking for? One thing you want to look at is a sales leakage study. So this is a sales leakage study. It's from 2017. It's for a specific area, and then it goes in proximity, so 1 mile, 3 miles, and 5 miles from a geographical location. So this sales tax leakage study, or sales leakage study, was done. We got to move that over to the right-hand side again. Well, I guess you don't have to see that. It's a 2017. These are the industry grouped, and then I've kind of put the arrows at where there's opportunity. So anywhere you see a high dollar amount in green, that's where there's an opportunity for retail at exit 13. So that means that this is the difference between the demand in the area and the availability of those products and services in the area. The other thing that you look at is each retailer, and I have a whole spreadsheet full of these that lists all kinds of retailers. But each retailer looks for their own demographics. So having local data is really important. If you look at census tract data, the 2020 census population figures are just coming out. I just got an email about those today. It was really exciting looking at that. Me and Brian will be geeking out over that later. But one thing that you want to look at is if you look at our population, they have us at about 29,000, but that was 2019, and that was done by the state of Utah. National data has us at 26,000 as our population. We're closer to 33, maybe even 35,000 if you just look at residential building permits and multiply them by 2.7, which is our average household in Washington City. So if I can get that data in the hands of retailers, that puts us into population minimums that allow for a wider range of retailers. They also look at household income, traffic counts, and then there's this whole customer base comments. And this is when you go to the retailer conventions and you sit one-on-one with them and you hear what it is they're looking for, their customer profile. So that gets really interesting. But I have the benefit of working with some great economic developers across the state who are really keen on sharing this information for the benefit of Utah. So we will be looking at this, and this is how retailers determine where they're going to go. The other option is office. So office space, this has been kind of controversial. Well, not controversial. It's been office space was in demand in Utah. It was about 70% of the projects that were coming into Utah in 2019 were office projects, most of them in fintech or technology, and most of them Lehigh, Wasatch Front area. That's now flipped to about 30% office because of the work from home. COVID obviously had a big impact on this, but there is still a high demand for office space. We'll go over some projects, so it'll kind of put some projects to these. So Tech Ridge is an example of a industry specific development. This Tech Ridge is in St. George. They created a CRA, or a community reinvestment area, specifically for attracting high income technology-based companies, and we have a few up there already. They're using the tax increment financing to put back into the amenities, and there are extensive amenities in this area. They're building a couple of roads, so 2 more access roads. There's housing. This is kind of an overview. Now we have an opportunity similar to this in Washington, and that's our Zion Medical Village. It has a different focus. It's an industry that has higher paying jobs, so it's a very job focused development, and it backs onto the Red Cliffs Reserve, which is 62,000 acres of trails and hiking and a beautiful reserve. So those amenities are kind of natural amenities that we find in southern Utah, and this community, or this development, has 2 trailheads that will be there. I just touched base with the developers for this today. They're working on a little bit of a redesign, and they'll be presenting that to the city in the next few weeks. Here's some recent office projects. These were done in my previous position, but I have the stats on them just so you can see kind of the impact and the potential here. Project HOT is what we call it, is Intergalactic or Airborne ECS. They're an aerospace R&D and engineering company. These are the tax revenues that they'll bring to the state. The wages, that's $23 million, and 73 jobs at about 80,000 per job. That's the average.
Excuse me, Rusty, where is this? Is this Tech Ridge again?
That's the airport.
This is out by the St. George Regional Airport?
It's by the old airport. Tech Ridge is the old airport up by Dixie Tech.
Where is this one?
This is out by south of Washington, right by the new airport on our property.
Intergalactic is a project that is being built. Yeah. It was a project that I helped go through the incentive process on the local and state level.
I'm sorry, but I'm still confused about where it is.
Where they are currently?
Where is this being built?
Oh, it's being built at Tech Ridge.
Oh, this is being built at
Tech Ridge. Yes, Intergalactic is in it. So there's Vasion, there's Zonos, and then this is a new building, which will be their headquarters.
Yeah.
So it's being built at Tech Ridge. The building comes after the deals go through. So the capital investment, because they're building a building, is about 20 million. And then they received a state incentive for 7 years. And we'll go over that state incentive and why that state incentive is something that we should keep in mind. Project Cool is Captive Air. They're the largest manufacturer of commercial ventilation systems in the United States. They came to so they already had a presence in St. George, but they're actually putting a second headquarters and research and development. Part of what attracted them, I met with a 3-person team. Part of what attracted them to this area is the lifestyle, the amenities, the gentrification of the downtown area, the connectivity at the airport. All of those we draw from as a neighboring city of Washington City. Also, the tax revenues that they bring in, the wages, 20 jobs at 86,000, and I know they're poised to grow as well. They are currently in the Spectrum building, which is why their capital investment is lower. This is for a refurbishment, and then they had a tax incentive from the state of 7 years. We have the potential of getting these same types of projects in Washington City. There's just a little preparation that we need to do in order to attract these, because we have all of the same amenities and lifestyle and assets that St. George City has, but there's a reason why they're going in St. George. So the other option for commercial development is industrial. This brings a huge capital investment, building buildings, putting in manufacturing equipment. That's a huge investment in the community, and it increases the property tax values, which increases property tax revenues. Diversifies the industry base. We're very largely tourism and recreation based, and then this allows some diversification. It also brings outside dollars inside the community, so it's a great. And then it also provides quality jobs, higher than average wages in some of those other industries. One reason why we are a good location is for logistics. Utah in general, we're called the crossroads of the West, right? Or I guess it's crossroads of the world now is what they're saying at the state level. So go Utah is saying that now. So Southern Utah has we're within a day's drive of major markets, and we have a good labor force. We have educated labor. We can draw from a smaller labor pool just because of kind of how we live here, our work ethic. So we have an opportunity for this as well. One place where they did this is in Fort Pierce Industrial Park. Another one is in Hurricane. They did it at Gateway. And so they got those large projects that have gone, and they built a place for them, and then they targeted that industry. Here's some recent industrial projects that came through this area. Project Cool. Oh, that's not Project Cool. That had a different name. That's the wrong name. Anyway, RS Technologies took over the old Viacom building. It's 260,000 square foot. So they already had a building, but their capital investment, it was still 35 million. That's in equipment. So that increased their real property tax. They're bringing good paying jobs, 358 of them at about 45,000. That's their average. They have some that are higher. Most that are above a certain threshold, they have to have at least 50 above the county average in order to qualify for state incentives. And they did receive a state incentive. They received a state incentive, and one of the qualifications to receive a state incentive is a local incentive or a local support. And then the other one is Project Success, which is the Orgel expansion, which took place in Hurricane. And this is a deliberate effort from that city as well. We have some opportunities within Washington City. We have some industrial area already. I just spoke with the developers of the Red Waters Industrial Park, and I don't know if they're calling it that, but it's near Red Waters. This is out near the landfill. It's about 200 acres, and they have about 48 lots that they have that will be ready within the next few months. I'm going to work with them to submit these sites and get the infrastructure in place, or as they get the infrastructure in place, to submit these sites to bring some of those industrial projects to Washington City as well. And then we have a really great opportunity here, and we have a lot of support. This is really a regional effort here. If you notice the section in red, most of this is owned by Sitla, but there's also some privately owned parcels, and I'm speaking with the landowners, including Sitla, about doing a master planned industrial development. So light industrial and advanced manufacturing, aerospace R&D. St. George City, this is east of the airport, so that section that's not outlined in red is St. George. So St. George, Sitla, Washington City. Hurricane is just off of Highway 7 to the north. There's an opportunity for all of those cities to work together. And what's really important in economic development is that it's not a race to the bottom, that we're not competing city to city, that we're collaborating regionally and collaborating locally and competing regionally. We draw a much larger workforce, much more assets if we combine those efforts.
Hey, Rusty, can you
Yes.
go back to the last slide? So on Country Way and those residential subdivisions on Red Waters, just kind of north or northeast of the Virgin River, looks like that's the orange area. Is the purple area, that is what I recall as Country Way turns into Landfill Road. That's what I recall is kind of the buildable area there. But but is that 200 acres in that purple buildable area there? Because a lot of that doesn't look buildable.
There is some topography issues there, but I drove out there the other day and they've done a lot of dirt work. So there is 48 lots in this general area.
In the purple area,
with
is that
the
where
correct
48 lots
zoning.
are?
Yeah, with the correct zoning in place for some industrial projects. Not all of it is buildable, but they've done quite a bit of work to mitigate that.
And then the road is going to connect down in off down to, what do they call it? Exit 10, maybe off the Southern Parkway.
Well, it doesn't show it, but
At
yeah.
some point where you kind of see under Landfill Road where it kind of V's or Y's off, it's going to eventually come down and connect into the Parkway.
It will to Highway 7 past Washington Dam Road.
Okay, thank you.
These are just, as I'm assessing the area, these are just some areas where I'm kind of focusing in to see what the opportunities are in these areas. This aerospace R&D park, we're actually a really great community for aerospace. We have a base in it already. We have a history of aerospace. We have the Hazy building. Udvar Hazy building is named after Sky West is located here. We have this great regional airport that we had to move, and then we have all this buildable land around it. So in the last 7 years at the county level economic development, I didn't see aerospace projects coming here, but in the last 18 months, we've had at least 6 projects looking here, and some that have visited several times that are really taking a hard look. We're right between Nellis Air Force Base and Hill Air Force Base. Aerospace and defense is a strength for the state, and it's a target industry for the state, and they would love to support us in targeting that industry for Southern Utah. So we're in discussion and looking through the feasibility of this. This is, again, a review. These are kind of the key things, key components of having good economic development, having strong economic development. And we're going to go over some of the policies and process and then the strategy. So as we put together a strategy, this is what I like to call EHarmony for communities and industries, where you go through this process of matching them up on several different compatibility and desirability points. So we've gone through this at a county level, and I want to go through this at a city level. And what we want to do is we want to find out what industries are best suited and what will make a good match for our community based on our community profile. So this is a pretty in-depth analysis and process. I won't bore you with the details of it, but this is kind of the general idea, is that we determine some short-term, we have a short-term strategy, and then we have a long-term strategy. And the long-term strategy is where we have high desirability, but maybe low compatibility, but with the potential to be more compatible if we work on a few things. And we'll talk about some of those. These are some examples. So if you remember the sales tax or the sales leakage study, it kind of identified auto sales as a potential at exit 13. And wouldn't you know, there's an auto mall being proposed at exit 13. So also grocery stores listed really high. We need more grocery stores in Washington City. And those would be those are examples of targeted short run. So we have those, some are under development. There's already some grocery stores looking in the area. It's just a matter of kind of getting us over the finish line with landing those. And then opportunity in the long run. This is an example. This is a some kind of a jet engine, but that's an example. We have a little more work to do to bring those industries because we're looking at infrastructure, bringing infrastructure to the east side of the airport. But what I would caution, and I'm not trying to pick on any industry, but caution in the long run is storage sheds. So all commercial development is not created the same. If you look in the lower right-hand corner and the upper left-hand corner and compare the two, aerospace is probably going to have long-term viability, bring jobs, more capital infrastructure. Storage sheds are great. They're in really high demand right now, but how long does that demand last, and how many jobs does it provide, and how much space does it take up? Right. And then probably what I would say we should stay away from is an industry like paper manufacturing. This is a toilet paper factory, really high water usage, really high water waste. So we have to take into consideration also our limitations. So water being, that's why when we do aerospace, I want to be sure that it's aerospace engineering, research and development, not necessarily the processes that require high water usage, because that's a high water use industry too. So we segment it and we focus on the engineering and the R&D portion of it. This is how we all work together. This is a review as well. There's a state level responsibilities, a regional level responsibilities, and then what we can do on a local level to kind of target and make our city the site of choice. And the one thing I wanted to talk today about is local tax incentives. I'm going to go over a few tools. We've already created a tool. This is the PID, which passed, I think, at the end of July. We have a PID policy in place. We have several developers interested in that PID and interested in utilizing that. And then the next thing is community reinvestment areas. Now, this has been ongoing. Washington City has been doing this. When I look through the records, it looks like the agency was created in 2012. And then an area was proposed in January of 2017, and then an area was designated in February of 2018. So we'll just kind of go over this is just a review. So we create the state code allows us to create an agency. The city can create it or the county can create it. In this case, the city created it. So when you have a CRA, it is a legislative body that is separate from the city. So and it can be, when redevelopment, sometimes the nomenclature, so EDAs, CRAs, CDAs, RDAs, those are all the same now. They've put them all in, they're all called CRAs now. You may hear the old nomenclature, but they're all considered CRAs, and the state law is continually changing on how these work.
Hey, Rusty.
Yeah.
I hate to interrupt,
No,
but just
no
want
worries.
to clarify. You said that the CRAs are a different legislative body, separate. Would you just explain that just a little bit, please?
It's a political subdivision, so it's its own political subdivision. And I'll go over the history, and it will become a little more clear as we go through this. So stimulating redevelopment. So redevelopment, you think a blighted area. So they were originally created for blighted areas, but then they've evolved to also include the promotion of economic development, to address underdeveloped or unproductive development, and then also the original, which is to address blight. So an agency could have areas designated with that goal in mind, or a combination of those goals in mind. The governing board of a CRA is the current members of the legislative body that created the CRA. So in this case, it would be the city council. So the Washington City CRA is the city council. That's the governing board. Now, we would hold separate meetings for CRA discussions because it's a separate body. So much like what's a good example of that?
Oh, I don't know what a good example is, but yeah, they're the same board. So often people will have their board meeting before or after a council meeting, but it's a lot like going into a closed meeting where you actually close this meeting, open your CRA board, but it's always the mayor and the city council are that board.
So really, it's just the same other than it's a meeting unto itself.
Yeah, it's a separate meeting from the city council, but you are the same board.
And I'm actually going to propose that we start holding those meetings so we can have some of those discussions within that meeting. previously, to your question, Councilman Ivy, previous versions of the statute had a taxing entity committee, which consisted of the participating taxing entities, and we'll go over what that looks like. But they had representation from those taxing entities that would meet, and that's what that's what the agency consisted of previously. But that's changed, so now it's the city council. But you still want to work with these taxing entities, and we'll talk about that. So tax increment financing can be both property tax and sales tax, and it could be sales tax from the city and sales tax at the county as well. So either one of those can be utilized. And essentially, it's the increment means the increase. And I'll get this is a better visual for it. So basically, when you freeze the tax base in a certain area, when you create an area, and you have to go through a budget and a plan, there's a lot of steps. It usually takes about 6 months to put one of these together, sometimes longer, depending on the market. But the idea is that you freeze the tax base, so there's no reduction of taxes received from the taxing entities. There's an increase, but that increase is utilized or put back into the CRA area. So it's basically, the idea is to reinvest back into the CRA area. So you designate an area, say you have an area of blight, and you say, well, if we bring these projects in, it takes a while to bring the projects in, but as those projects developed and you change a blighted area into a more productive area, the increment of taxes, the property tax, that capital investment increases the property values, which increases the taxes, and those go plowed back into the development for a span of a set number of years. And then after that, all those taxes, all the increase in the property, which may not have developed without this tool, or may not have developed to the same potential without this tool, will then benefit all of the taxing entities that have participated.
Can I ask another question? There? So you talked about a blighted area. So I assume that would be an area that's never been developed, or one that has and it's not doing well.
Yeah, maybe a city develops and they've got, on their main drag, they've got a place where there are a bunch of junk cars, right? And that might have been okay 20, 30, 40 years ago, but now they want to clean that up. They're getting a lot of traffic, and so they want to turn it into a retail area. So TIF, tax increment financing, can be used to purchase the property. It can be used to mitigate environmental hazards, and it can be used to improve the development so that it's greater than what the market would bear.
Would it also be used to subsidize to the owners of that property to clean it up? Is there any incentives for that?
Yes. And incentives can be used in a lot of different ways. In Fort Pierce, we've had projects that a tax increment goes right back to the company. And that's especially with manufacturing, you look at the huge capital expenditure in terms of their building and their equipment and moving their production and shutting down somewhere else, or even just expanding somewhere else. Oftentimes that's the way you get those. Amazon, the state gave a tax rebate back to Amazon to bring Amazon here. And then we see the sales tax from Amazon going throughout the state. And
is that conditioned on the owner of that property's financial situation? Do they have to prove that they don't have the money to clean it up on their own? Or is it just an incentive that the city would go to them and say, we'd like to see something different with this. We'd like to partner with you on this.
It can have it. Yes, you can do that. There are multiple of ways, but yes, that's a good example of one way. Another example is using the PID. So so that increment would be really small at the beginning, and then it has this growth, right? So towards the end, there's a lot more. There are a lot more funds being generated. They're not necessarily, kept in a bank account, but they're plowed back in. So this is kind of just the property tax increase, and it shows that curvature. Now we implemented the PID, and the PID is useful, and it can be used in conjunction with a CRA and with TIF, because TIF, or that tax increment, some of that could go to pay back the PID. So for example, if you have a developer that wants to improve an industrial site and put in all of the roads and and have shovel ready sites with all the infrastructure in place, and they want to pay for that up front, they can utilize the PID to do that. And then they can utilize tax increment financing if you get if it's set up correctly, to then pay back the PID. So that's how you kind of leverage that upfront development money and then marry it with this tax increment financing. They could also be done separately. You could still do the PID and have that additional tax in that district. So they would pay more annually. They don't have to use TIF to go towards it, but TIF can participate in that. So these are all options that are available depending on the participating taxing entities, what the city would like to do, and a very thorough and complex financial analysis. So a little more on how this works and where we're at. So the governing board is the city council. The agency was created. An area has been designated, but there's no financial analysis had been done on the designated area from 2018. And there are no interlocal agreements for the tax increment with the taxing entities. So right now, Washington City is in this by ourselves. And so we have to pay attention to what the other taxing entities would like to see, because sometimes what the cities, what is a benefit to the city is not necessarily of same benefit to the county or the other taxing entities. So we kind of have to negotiate and come to an agreement on what works best overall. So if you look at kind of how property tax revenues are split up, this is an actual example of an area. And this is pretty typical. The lion's share of property tax revenues go to the school, which means they are the largest participant in tax increment financing. And they can give up anywhere from 50 to 100%. And remember, this isn't current taxes that they're collecting. They're not giving up current taxes. They're giving up an increment on the growth with the expectation that there will be growth, so that in the end, there's a better development generating more taxes. I had some preliminary conversations with the school board to see kind of where they would like to see things. They're interested in growing wealth. So having outside the state investment. They don't want to have something move from the Wasatch Front to St. George necessarily, but they would love to see something move from California or something move from another area in the country as an investment into Utah. We don't like to compete within Utah either for projects. At this case, they say no retail projects. They don't like to incent retail projects for a variety of reasons, and they don't like to incent housing projects. They don't like to do one-off projects. They would like to see a greater vision and a greater plan. And then they want to make sure they're not going to consider projects. So a developer can't go directly to the school board and say, we want you to do TIF. That has to be initiated at the city or the county. And then this CRA has to be created. Washington County doesn't really they don't have a criteria, but in conversations with our commissioners, they're looking at diversifying the local economy, bringing new industries to the area, higher paying jobs, and they want support of the city and the school board. Now we're going to get into the state. So state tax incentives.
Sorry. So in your assessment with the county, would the county actually back off of a project if the school was not in it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, we have to have, everybody has to come to an agreement, and we'll do that through a financial analysis and look at, the but-for argument in these cases. And then it's also, so you create the area, you generate the revenue, and then you evaluate the projects individually as they come through. And we want an evaluation criteria for that everybody can live with. So that's what I'd like us to develop. I would like the agency to start meeting to develop that. And I have some tools for that.
So we're not saying that they would say no if the school district wasn't a part of it, but they would love to see everybody together so that everybody's participating together. But you could see a situation where you had a sales tax incentive that the county participated in that the school district doesn't collect any sales tax. And so they wouldn't participate in that one.
Right. So in sales tax, we haven't had that conversation with the county, but it's potential that the county would contribute their portion of sales tax for a retail project. But, and this is just, this is very, the school board is very kind of aligned with the state. So I'm going to go over the state ed TIF. Now, in all those projects that I told you about, intergalactic, captive air, Orgel expansion, and RS Technologies, all of those projects, with the exception of Orgel, received a state incentive as well. And one of the qualifications, well, we'll go through the qualifications for a state incentive, but let's look at their policy. So the ed TIF just means economic development tax increment financing, and that's on the revenues that the state collects. So they'll give up to 30% of new state revenues. And those are still, so those are sales tax, their portion of sales tax, corporate withholding taxes, anything paid to the state is what they work with within the ed TIF. This is their policy. So they do a maximum credit of 30%. We can develop a similar policy for a CRA here, that we set it at a certain percentage over a certain period of time. No more than 50% in 1 year. So they are flexible as to what percentage they give each year. They may have some companies that want a larger percentage up front and lower percentage or even, and they have a whole financial process that they go through to determine that. They will not participate in retail business operations. So we're not going to have the support of the state for a CRA if it's a retail project. Oh, the big thing is jobs. They're looking at jobs and capital investment. So capital infrastructure into the area and then jobs. They set it at 110 of the county wage. That's an average of all jobs in the county. So maybe your next question is, what is the Washington County average wage that they use? It's $37,472 per year is what the average county wage is. This isn't household income, this is average county wage. And then 110% of that means that the jobs being brought in to qualify for ed TIF would have to be at least 41,219, and there would have to be at least 50 jobs. They also have some other things that can score you points. These are the other things. They want you to use Utah vendors. They like that local commitment. Okay, and okay, so why offer incentives? The reason about $70 billion annually is offered in incentives across the United States. So a lot of states are offering incentives. So in some cases, it's that to compete for projects that on a state and local level. That's one reason. And what we compete for is quality projects. So that is determined by how we define that. So we could be looking some common things that incentives are used for are to attract jobs, higher wages, capital investment, community commitment. When you bring a company to the area, I know we met with Family Dollar. There are several other companies that exist just to support Family Dollar. So it spurs entrepreneurship when you bring in a big company. There are a lot of other ancillary companies that can then service that business. And then why have a policy? Why develop a policy? It's to negotiate from a position of strength. If we don't have a policy and say our neighboring cities do have a policy, they're a little further down the road, and time is money, and the process to create or negotiate an incentive will take a lot longer in a city that doesn't have a policy, or at least doesn't have an evaluation criteria.
One thing I was thinking about as far as having a policy in place, but also you said that we have an area designated that was in like 2018. Is that something you could also share with the mayor and council so that we know kind of what that area already is or what those areas are?
Sure. So most, I wish I had the map pulled up. It's an old scanned copy, and I was going to put a picture of it up, but it's not a really good copy. But it's essentially, it includes exit 13. It has both the north side and the south side, but it does not include the Auto Mall area. And it doesn't include the northeast side. It's the northwest side, the south a little bit on the south side, and then the Grapevine Crossing area. And it went from a proposed area being just Grapevine to that larger area. And that's the thing with CRAs is it's easier to make them smaller if you need to, but making them bigger, especially after you've done the financial analysis, is very difficult.
So is there a reason why it was just that area and we didn't include the area down by the airport? Because as we're a lot of, from what I'm really reading, is that the retail isn't necessarily the state or the school district's appetite, but industry that creates jobs certainly is. I mean, have we looked at the airport area down for, we're talking the aerospace R&D park, some of that areas?
Yes. So actually, I didn't know where it was within the process, but this CRA designated area or the survey area was designated in 2018. So I just found that
You're just picking it back up.
I'm just picking it up, and I'm
appreciate
actually
that.
before we go through the fight, it's good that we didn't go through the fight, get too deep into the financial analysis on that, because we have an opportunity now to expand the area. And I would say more is better, and we can always reduce it if it doesn't make sense, and we can look at different scenarios as well. So that's already underway. I've designated a larger area, and I have Zion Public Finance going through surveying the area. So they go through a process, and we'll have some models, and I actually am recommending that they do some follow-up and come and present to the council on some options there. So it would require, it was done by resolution, so it would require that the city council, or would it be the agency, do vote on a resolution to expand that area. That's all we have to do at this point. So
yeah, I appreciate that. I just wasn't up to speed on that area, so I wanted to make sure that. And then I thought, man, it sure makes sense to have some of these other areas included in that if we're putting this in our tool bag.
Well, and we can do a larger area. So the idea behind that we have development going on at Exit 13, and I think the city's willing to invest a little bit into that development. And what I would ask of our other taxing entities is that, because the area both earns the increment, and then that's where the increment goes back. So whatever revenues raised from that area goes back into that area, and we can designate that non-contiguous area. So there's not a lot of incentive for some of the other taxing entities to plow back into that area, but there is in the airport area. And so that's why we're going through an analysis for the feasibility to determine the feasibility of including that in one CRA. So a discontiguous CRA where the earnings are plowed back in. And maybe this is the economic engine at Exit 13 to help us get some infrastructure so we can win a few projects. And then once we get those projects here, some of that tax increment could possibly go back into.
Am I hearing that you can only have one area?
No, you can have multiple areas, but the money raised in that area goes back into the area.
So that's why you're saying that it would be good to have them tied together, or
right,
non-contiguous, whatever.
Right. And we can better leverage our partners. So I think bearing in mind the importance of participating partners, I think it's a benefit. You know, when we ask them what they want, they told us what they want, and we have an opportunity to develop that, but we're going to need some help. And so I'm saying if Washington City is going to invest, whether with the tools that we have at our disposal, which is sales tax and a little bit of property tax, but if we're willing to invest to make a better development at Exit 13 that will increase that property tax and increase the sales tax revenues, then those I would like for the taxing entities I would propose to the taxing entities, and that's actually the next steps going forward, is that we start having discussions with taxing entities, with representatives from the taxing entities, that they give up some of that tax increment that's generated by Washington City doing a sales tax increment, and they don't have to participate necessarily in the projects that that don't fit their criteria. But if there are projects that fit their criteria that are in that zone, then they participate. But the earning on that entire area can go towards anywhere within the area, into those two geographically separate but same CRA area. We'll have lots of conversations about this, and I'm sure there's it can get pretty detailed. But at this point, I want to focus on either a policy is pretty rigid, but evaluation criteria for projects allows for some flexibility, and we may want to do that. For example, there was a project that we worked on, 2 projects, Project A and Project B. On paper, they look the same. We submitted them to the state saying we support Project A, but we don't support Project B. And there was reasoning behind that. But when the state looked at it and said, well, you have no evaluation criteria. It wasn't that there wasn't an evaluation criteria, is that we didn't articulate why Project A we supported and why Project B we didn't. Project A was a company that had invested in the community, that was doing an expansion, that had great relationships, that brought a lot more to the area. And Project B was an unknown. And the jobs were about the same. The infrastructure and the investment was about the same, but this particular city that we dealt with decided they would support this one, but not this one. So it gives us, it helps to avoid political problems and perception problems that, you know, you hear all kinds of things about if you don't have a criteria or an evaluation criteria. It helps us to be able to look at projects and measure them with the same ruler. So I would advocate that we create an evaluation criteria at least, so that
Rusty, let me ask you a question, please, if you don't mind, before we go any further. When you're talking about incentives, you talked about competing for quality projects. Does that mean if there's a big enough company that's looking in St. George or Scottsdale or Arizona, you know, New Mexico, wherever? So is that mainly what this is for? Is that we incentivize these companies to come here rather than to those other areas?
That's one way that it can be used, but it's not the only way. Like for example, Orgel was a company that's here. It provides good jobs for Hurricane. There's capital infrastructure there. Orgel was looking at relocating to Mesquite. So a local incentive was offered because it was both a retention to retain Orgel in the area, but they also wanted to expand. They had some topography problems with expanding at their location, but the Hurricane was able to mitigate those by offering a little bit of an incentive so that they wouldn't leave the area. So sometimes it's used for expansions. Lighthouse Foods expanded here. Several companies, Ram Manufacturing expanded. Wilson Electronics, I think they renamed it. Ramco, yeah, Ram Company, and actually Ram Company was a major investor in Intergalactic, so they're the reason Intergalactic is here. So incentivizing projects like this beget more projects. You look at their supply chain and their and just word of mouth gets out there. One comment that Lighthouse gave was, you know, usually we weren't sure that the population and the workforce population was enough to support the operation we wanted to do here. But what we found here is that because of some of our crazy lifestyle in Southern Utah and in Utah in general, this Lighthouse location has a much lower turnover rate. And so they can draw from a smaller workforce pool. So these are all assets of the community, but yes, that is one way. But there are multiple ways, including incentivizing a company that started here to stay here. Some of our Southern Utah companies like Vasion or Zonos may have an easier time going to Lehigh area to attract talent, but they've invested in this area. And so the city is working with them. St. George City is working with them for Tech Ridge. So it's not just for outside companies. In fact, the state awards incentives 2/3 to local companies expanding over new companies coming in. So that's part of our policy. We can determine what we want. If we need more diversification, we want to bring in outside companies, we can do that as well.
Just share the one other thought that I had was local startup as opposed to coming in or staying.
So there are a lot of resources for local startups. Typically, we don't offer a tax incentive for a startup company. And that's usually because most startups fail within the first 5 years. So the state has a policy of saying, you know, you have to be in the black, and you have to have at least 3 years past revenue, and you have to have good projections. So a high growth company they may look at, and they evaluate, you know, a manufacturing company, it won't be evaluated the same as a tech company because they're different industries. So we can create policies that incentivize the growth that we're looking to attract to the area and support the businesses that are currently here in those expansions. And also providing services. We have a wealth of business services. We have a great tax environment. We're a pro-business state. We're a pro-business area. There are a lot of good reasons. And I was going to say that's our largest, our best asset is this beautiful place where we live that has this live, work, play. You don't have to, it doesn't take you 5 hours to get on a ski slope here. You could be at the lake during the day and skiing in the afternoon in Southern Utah. So there are most of what attracts businesses here we already have, and these are just a few tools that we can put in place. I'll say one last thing is that it's less about incentivizing the company with a cash incentive, and it's more about having a site ready to go, or at least having the infrastructure. Leaps and bounds, that is more advantageous, increasingly more advantageous to them, because a lot of the unknowns are mitigated that way. Okay, so we negotiate. Why have a policy? We negotiate from a position of strength, avoid political problems and with perception problems, and then we align our priorities, which was the last thing. And so we just need to decide what our priorities are, then align and structure some incentives around that and some evaluation criteria. And then keep in mind that we have these partners. So we'll put together a vision for Washington City and then develop that strategic plan, which involves these tools of how to accomplish that. So for follow-up or next steps, I would love to have EDC Utah come and present local incentive policy best practices. They have a vantage point of seeing incentive policy throughout the state. They can tell us, they can help us avoid a misstep. So I would love to have them do that. I would also like them to present an overview of industry projects, trends, and opportunities for Southern Utah, specifically tailored to Southern Utah. And then I would love to have Zion Public Finance come in and put together a project area, a budget, and we start getting into the nitty-gritty of what's feasible and what we can attract and what the market can absorb. And then schedule those initial meetings with the taxing entity so that we can bring our partners on board to the benefit of everyone. Any questions?
Get after it.
Okay.
Thanks, Rusty. Okay, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Seconded.
Motion and second, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, see you in about 15 minutes.
I'm surprised they're not. But it helps them decide.
Didn't realize it's past.
Chat out there.
Welcome to our city council meeting tonight. Appreciate all of you attending. We also invite those that would like to attend on washingtoncity.org/meetings. Today is August 25th, 2021. I've asked Councilman Bundy if he will offer our invocation and Councilman Ward if he will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Our Father in heaven, we humbly bow before thee and express gratitude for the opportunity to be here in Washington City, in our country that we are citizens of. We are grateful for the freedoms that we have, for the Constitution of this land that affords us the opportunity to make decisions individually and as a community. And we pray that the Constitution might always be in place for us, that we can fall to and look to as a guidance for those things that we make decisions on each day. We ask for thy direction this evening as we consider the things that we have before us, that we might be mindful of the decisions that we make, and that they are those that would be a betterment for the entire community. And we ask for these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Please rise and follow me in the Pledge of Allegiance for this great country. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, gentlemen. I'll now entertain a motion to approve our agenda for this evening.
So made, Mayor.
Seconded by Bundy.
Thank you. Motion is second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, gentlemen. Announcements, anything to announce?
Yes, Mayor, I have an item, something that I'm very privileged to be a part of. The Children's Museum in St. George is having an event tomorrow from 3 to 5. It is a open house and ribbon cutting where we will introduce the new director of the Children's Museum. There'll be refreshments and tours will be provided by the museum staff. Again, that's tomorrow, 3 to 5. It's the old Dixie College Building, 86 South Main. But please come and participate, and you might even enjoy going through the museum. I even enjoy it at my age. So anyway, thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Any other announcements?
Yeah, Mayor, if you don't mind, I'd just like to let those here and those tuning in, just as a reminder that on September 11th, that's going to be a day of service in this area. There's going to be a lot of organizations, and even the citywide, we're going to have some cleanup efforts. And so just kind of pay attention to those. And if you have a chance to be involved in those, that'll be a day where a lot of us will be doing some service and thinking of that, thinking of what it means to be an American that day. Thank you.
Thank you. Any others? We'll move on to item 3, declaration of abstentions and conflicts. Any to declare at this time? All right, then we'll move on to the consent agenda. Item A, approval of minutes from the city council meeting at 8/11/21. 2 items on local consent. To give local consent for an on-premise full-service restaurant liquor license for St. Helens Restaurant, LLC, and a consideration to give a local consent for a temporary beer event permit located at 1363 East Washington Dam Road, applicant Bavarian Workstadt. And final plats. Consideration to approve a final plat for the Heights at Washington Bench, Phase 3, located at approximately Arabian Way and Coral Way, applicant Kent Rasmussen. Consideration to approve a final plat for Roadrunner Ridge, Phase 5, located at approximately Roadrunner Drive and Black Oak Drive, applicant Robert Smith. And a final plat amendment, consideration to approve a final plat amendment for Sycamore Estates located at Sycamore Lane. Purpose is to incorporate the common areas into lots 1 and 8, applicant Jed Christensen. Any questions or comments on the consent agenda?
Just a question, Mayor, the restaurant liquor license for St. Helens, that is an annual license for them, isn't it?
Correct.
It's a reinstatement.
Yes.
If there's no comments, I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda as outlined by Mayor.
Maybe just one more comment.
It's not an issuance of a new license, it's a renewal of an existing license in the same category as exists.
Bundy, second the motion.
Thank you. Do you have a motion and a second? Roll call vote.
Staley, aye.
Ward, aye.
IVI.
Coates, aye.
Bundy, aye.
Thank you. Those are all approved. Item 5, public hearing. Consider an amendment to the 2021 fiscal year budget. Finance Director Brian Brown. I get hung up on semantics.
All right, Mayor and Council. So as throughout the year that we are, at times we need to make.
Ryan.
As throughout the year, at times we need to make budget adjustments. So this budget adjustment to the fiscal year 2021 budget, on here, we show the original was 97 million. And then the amended will be 99 million. And over right here, it lists the funds where the budget adjustments were made. So kind of a breakdown of this, we have in the briefing document explained the wages and benefit increases, which was a 10%, and then these new positions. And also the golf course had a pump go out, so we need to do a budget adjustment for that. Some refunds for community development. And then we had some purchases in 2020 fiscal year 2021 or last year. And they ordered them in April and they're not going to show up until September, October. So at a certain point we have to cut off and can't accrue those back. So what we have to do is just budget those in the next fiscal year when we're not going to receive the items till in October. So these are the items that make up the 1.5 million budget adjustments.
Brian, I just had maybe this is a question for Manager Red, but you said a pump went out at the golf station. Do we not budget for like some maintenance, or was this just such a big maintenance item that we had to go ahead?
Yeah, this is larger than a maintenance item. The pump actually crashed on us and needs to be completely replaced.
Okay.
We've been maintaining it and continuing to bring it along, but because of the cost,
It just wasn't something we were anticipating, and
we thought we could limp along for a few more years, but
And
As soon as we find somebody that can predict when the pumps will fail, we're
that's why
gonna,
we hired you.
we're
Thad.
gonna keep them around. Yeah.
No, so just one of my questions, and it kind of stems from the discussion we had with the fire trucks. I mean, some of these things, I know pumps are a lot different than a fire truck and rotation of them, but maybe we can look at some ideas to plan ahead that, hey, this pump's been running for 5 years and we anticipate it going down and needing to be built. Just something that might help me if we can look at some options on some of that.
And I know
for-
with this one, the golf course, because when Jeff came in, we talked about his budget. He did budget, I think it was 15 or 20,000 for repairs on the pump. And that's what they've done in the past because it hasn't had problems in the past. But this time, it just died.
yeah, I think it stems from them trying to be really conservative, and they just continually try to limp along, but at this point it just needed.
And I'm glad we're conservative. I think we should keep going that aspect, but I just want to have a plan for these type of items because we're gonna lose these things, but
They have a useful life, and this was
Yes.
probably well past that useful life. But
Figures that as soon as the golf course gets in the black,
Yeah.
the pump goes out.
That's the way it goes. So Brian, just a question. So make sure that I understand this. I don't see it on our packet, but on the paper when I printed it, the wages and benefits, that's the $954,505,
That's
I believe.
that's
And that's the
6%.
And that's the 6% increase, okay? And then we added positions for zoning tech, building inspector, assistant director, public works and public works project assistant, and that totals 436,000. And then 6 through 9, the golf course, the community development, rock wall shoes, and the Omni Ruptor is 174, and that's the total for 1,564,994. Just a quick question, just so I understand it, is on On the wages or the wages that are, does that include benefits and everything in that amount?
Yes, that's wages, benefits, everything.
It's
in
a
there.
total. And in that increase, was part-time included also in that, or is that just full-time?
That is full-time only.
Okay. And then if you just explain, it says in the briefing document, something about lateral pay could exceed how this is budgeted. Would you explain that? Is that like, if we need to go beyond what our normal pay range is that what that means? So
So-
we might be able to go beyond our budgeted amount to get someone?
So what that's mainly talking about is there are some people retiring and it's moving towards a transition.
Okay.
So if they retire and we don't need someone, then we'll just transition over and then those people that retired would drop off.
So it wouldn't mean that if we have somebody that's been here for a long time, they're probably going to make more than a new employee. And so is that some of that lateral movement also?
When we plugged them in, we plugged in a new position and then right now they're both beyond the budget, but when that transitions happen, then the one that retired or left would be removed from the budget. So.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions regarding this budget amendment?
No other additional questions. Again, this is a public hearing. Any of you out there that have a question or a comment on our budget amendment? Any public comments via email or text? Tara?
We do not have any public comments, Mayor.
Okay, then I will entertain a motion to close this public hearing.
So moved. Second.
Thank you. I have a motion and a second. Roll call vote.
Bundy, aye.
Coates, aye.
Ivy, aye.
Ward, aye.
Staley, aye.
Thank you, gentlemen. Move on to item 6, resolution. Consideration to approve a resolution amending the 2021-2022 fiscal year budget.
Mayor, if there's no comments, I'd like to make the motion that we approve the resolution amending the 2021-2022 fiscal year budget.
Bundy, second.
Motion and a second. Again, roll call vote.
Staley, aye.
Ward, aye.
Ivy, aye.
Coates, aye.
Bundy, aye.
All right, that is approved. Thank you, gentlemen. Item 7, ordinance. Consideration to approve an ordinance amending the medical alert program for utility billing collections. Rick Hansen.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. This is part of our process we've been updating our various policies and procedures in the department. The medical alert program, basically, we flag the people with a different colored tag on their meter. So if we go to a shut off and it has an orange tag instead of a white tag, we know that there needs to be an additional step. The program's been in existence. The original ordinance was in 2009. And basically it requires us to give people with a life-threatening medical condition extra notice, typically a 30-day certified letter to let them know, and hopefully they can take care of their account before we have to go to a shut off. The main change, and you should have in your packet, there was a markup version. The change to the ordinance itself was pretty minor, just a few words here and there. The biggest change is we before they just needed some sort of note from a medical doctor. This one, we've established a common form that we would have everybody use, so it's on the same format and responding to the same questions with the same information. And so that's probably the biggest addition or change is adding that form. And then the customers required to keep that updated twice a year in January and July.
Rick, how come we do it twice a year? It seems like a lot of paperwork.
Just to make sure that it's, we don't have people or customers on there that don't need to be. It could be a temporary, it could be, unfortunately, sometimes it's a end of life care thing. And so we just want to keep it as small of group as possible. We certainly, if we had to, we could do it annually or something like that. That's something we've carried over from the previous policy.
Is that something that staff can determine on that? I just look at it as if there's someone who has a medical condition that's life medical condition. It seems like burdensome that every 6 months they have to remember to.
And I think all they'd have to do is just have their doctor re-verify the form and just resend it. I don't think it should be a real big burden. And to give you an idea, there's only typically 10 to 12 customers on this program. So it's not like it's a large contingent. And we just want to make sure that it's valid that they're on it. And again, it doesn't give them a free pass to not pay or anything. It just requires us to make sure we've notified them. So if we have to do a shut off, that those people are taken care of in some way before that happens. So.
Hey, Rick, how would our residents that might be in need of this, how would they know about this? Or how would they be able to find out about it?
It's on the website.
On the city website under.
And then the forms are there that they can fill out. So, and again, the main change was just to have a standardized form. And
you know, Rick, I might just mention also that this council approved some COVID funding for our utility department for those that are maybe having some hardship, you know, that is addressed on a case by case basis. But again, to any of our citizens that are listening, that if that ever becomes necessary, that there's that availability also.
And the utility department does a wonderful job of helping people find those funds and make sure, you know, the last thing we want to do is shut people off, but we occasionally have to do that.
And I apologize. I said COVID funds. I apologize. I meant CARES funds.
Right.
Apologize.
And again, the utilities does a great job with that. So.
Could I ask kind of a non-related, well, it's related, but it's probably not your area. And that is, if we have someone in the community that has one of these conditions and we have a road closure for a project somewhere, could these contacts or these individuals be, do we look at that? Or how do we know when we close a road? Mr. Shaw, any idea? Do we have anything like that? I would suggest that maybe somebody, if we're going to close a road, that maybe this list of individuals might be looked at to make sure, or find out if they're within that street. I mean, I know that there always has to be emergency access, but it would just really be nice to know, to have the heads up if we close a street that is going to affect possibly the emergency services or anything like that. Again, not your area. I appreciate that.
But yeah, we certainly can make the list available. And like I say, it's very few that are currently on it. And Nikki would contact them on the 6 months to make sure things are updated. And, you know, we're not going to be too heavy handed with that, but we just want to make sure that we're aware if there's any conditions that are unusual or outside of the norm.
With those few that are on this already, have you had to send letters out then that gave that extra 30 days? Has that occurred?
I think since I've been here, there's only been twice.
Okay, so it doesn't happen very often.
It doesn't. And again, it's a small number. And again, we just want to, and usually when they're contacted, they'll make arrangements to take care of the bill.
Two more quick questions. So what prompted the amendment to the ordinance?
Again, just we're going through each of our policies and updating them and see where we can improve. There wasn't really a problem per se. It's just trying to improve.
And then how do those, you know, with a medical condition, how do they know about this when they come in to the utility department, or how do they know that this is an option for them to
in the primary? It's just on the website.
It's just on the.
Could I suggest, maybe it's been asked a couple of times, but that maybe there's a little blurb in our newsletter that goes out that, hey, this is that might help people. I mean, most people are going to be reading that, I would assume. So it might be a good place to just let people know.
We could do that.
Thank you, Rick. Any additional questions or comments? Okay, I'll be ready for a motion.
Mayor, I'll motion that we approve an ordinance amending the medical alert program for utility billing collections as presented by Mr. Rick Hansen.
Second by Coates.
Thank you. I do have a motion and a second. Roll call vote.
Staley, I.
Ward aye.
IBI.
Goats eye.
Bundy, I.
Thank you. That is approved. Item 8, award of bid, consideration to award the bid for site work for Grapevine Wells 3 through 6. Public Works Director.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. This bid is for partial equipping of our wells up at the Grapevine well sites. We drilled 4 new wells. This is doing the vaults, some of the power work and some of the water line connection work.
Hey, Mike. Sorry.
So like I said, this is for equipping the wells with vaults, some of the piping, getting the electrical to the site. There'll be another one that will come in for the equipping of the pumps and instrumentation on the wells at a later date. So with that, we advertised bid on this project, had 2 bidders on it, Vancon and Interstate Rock. Vancon was our low bid at $536,290. And we asked council to award to Vancon Construction.
And Mike, it's in our budget. It's all
It is.
covered.
Yep.
So there's no comments or questions. I'll make the motion that we award the bid for the site work for the Grapevine Wells 3 through 6 to Vancon for the amount of $536,290,000.
Not dollars.
Sorry, $536,290.
Bundy, second.
Thank you. I do have a motion and a second. Again, we'll do a roll call vote.
Bundy, I.
Goats eye.
IBI.
Ward aye.
Staley, I.
Thank you. Item 9, agreement, consideration to approve an agreement between Washington City and Spin Scooter. Rusty.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. We've got a couple of representatives from Spin Scooter here tonight if you have any additional questions. And they just came from Santa Clara, which the Santa Clara City Council just passed an agreement with Spin this evening. So for 100 scooters in Santa Clara. So I did provide you with a briefing document. The last time we talked about this was in a work meeting. There were a few questions, and so I'll just highlight a few things that are in addition to this agreement. One thing is that we've removed any charging hubs. The scooters that will be deployed within Washington City, should this agreement be awarded, would be charged in St. George at St. George charging hubs, and then also through their service where they pick them up at night, charge them and reset them. And then the second piece was that Spin has agreed to, it's on the back page or the second page of just above the chart that kind of gives you some comparisons. That Spin has agreed to include a 15-cent per trip fee remitted back to Washington City. And that's per trip. It's a little bit different from the deal that St. George had initially, where it was number of scooters deployed. And the reason why they went to this new model is it was designed to create a partnership to incentivize trips rather than deploying scooters that may or may not be used. I also included a few stats. So there is some language at the beginning of the summary of scooter agreements. It's been these were questions asked by the council. So actually, if you have any questions, I don't want to belabor this. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer those. And then we've got some representatives here as well.
Mayor, I have a question. So does St. George's contract, one of the things that I like about this is the fact that we have continuity, right? You just mentioned Santa Clara. We're familiar with Spin in St. George, and it's just a natural to expand into Washington. Do you know when the contract with St. George expires? Is it 1 year from now, or is it 2 years? Because this contract says 2 years.
You know, I apologize. I was just adjusting that and coordinating with Tara, so she'll have a new one. That was one thing that we missed. So this one would expire in 1 year, and they're happy to date that so that the expiration dates coincide. It was September.
Okay, so they're consistent.
Yes.
with our neighbors.
The one that you sign will be consistent. Yes.
Great. That was the main question, but I'm happy to listen to anything else you have to say, Rusty.
So I had a question on that aspect. So after the 1 year, did we just get an update from you on the report of where it's coming, the revenue that's producing for Washington City, or is it an automatic renewal, or do we get to reevaluate it again and have to decide on it again, or how does
I
that
can
work?
comment on that. It's got the renewal rights. It also has the right to give notice of intent to terminate. And so we calendar all those and we'll bring it up so that you're aware that, this contract's coming up for renewal. Do you wish to, allow the notice period to pass by, which would indicate a desire to auto renew? But yeah, it's got typical auto renewal with notice right provisions contained in it.
Yeah, looks like in the contract, so we would change the date shall be effective for 1 year from the effective date and shall be automatically renewed for up to 3 successive 1-year periods. Is that how you understand it, Thad? And
With a provision that any party can give notice with an intent to counsel.
60 days.
Yeah.
So the first line has been edited from August to September. So it'll start on September 3rd. It's just a few days. And that will coincide with the date that it was signed with St. George City. And then it would be for 1 year. So September 3rd, 2020 was the 2-year period for St. George. So I've changed the language from 2 years to 1 year. So the contract is.
And I read in the briefing document, 300 scooters. Do you anticipate deploying those gradually, or is that up to, or where are they hubbed? I know I see them around and sometimes on their side, usually with a kickstand.
Thank you. And hey, I'll just quickly introduce myself. My name is Alex April, and I'm the head of government partnerships for SPIN.
My name's Otto Milicevic. I'm the general manager.
And so 300, honestly, is a little bit on the higher side. One of the biggest reasons is just with Ironman coming up and large events, having that flexibility to bring more scooters when we do have those larger events and we're having more folks wanting to ride. And I know that there's concerns around congestion, that sort of thing, but I will let Otto speak to the scaling up and ensuring that we don't have too many scooters at once and that they're relocation requests are being answered to.
Yeah, so we typically start with about 50 to 100, and then based on demand, we scale up. With Ironman coming up, we would probably scale up sooner than later, just because of all of the people that are coming into the area. But again, until we start to notice the demand, we would not just flood the streets and kind of have them everywhere.
And one last comment that I would like to make is, we've been working really closely with Mark on finding the right number of scooters. And so, he's aware of how many scooters are out on the street. We have a dashboard that we can share with the city that shows the number of scooters available, the number of rides, that sort of thing. And so, we just want to be really transparent about that to ensure that what's going on in the public right of way as well.
Mayor, if you don't mind, Rusty, another question for you. So I kind of picture SPIN as maybe something that coordinates with Parks and Rec, but do they coordinate with you, or do we have a point person in the city that?
So I've already spoke with Barry about this, and we want to. He's already has his team working on designated areas where we think that the most successful deployment will take place, and then we'll monitor it from there. And actually SPIN has an internal program to kind of monitor where usage is based on the app and based on where the demand is. And I'm sure there'll be some adjustments. One good thing about SPIN is they do have a local office here. They're in my conversations with the other cities, they've been very responsive. They have W-2 employees, so it's not an independent contractor that's using their own vehicles. So if there is a problem with the pile up in a certain area or blocking areas, we'll be working with SPIN to adjust those concerns. We also have the benefit of St. George having these for over a year within their community. And so we've taken notes on what they've done with pinch points and designated scooter parking areas. There's both a carrot and the stick on that. So it doesn't allow you to park in an area that's designated a no parking area. But then it incentivizes you if you park in an area that where there's more demand. So those are things that we can work through with our Parks and Rec
And maybe
manager.
One thing to add, Councilman Staley, you mentioned with Parks and Rec, this contract does not give their users the right to drive on parks. It doesn't give them the right to drive on any city property outside of sidewalks, roads, and pedestrian ways. And so while it makes sense to say coordinate with Parks and Rec. I just want to make sure it's clear. This isn't giving them the right to ride in places that are parks or other recreation facilities unless it's a pedestrian right of way, a public pedestrian space already.
Yeah, and I actually really appreciate that because I understand that there's that geo fence. I understand this to be more of a tech company really than a scooter company. And so, and then just the other thing, so you can start in Santa Clara and ride all the way over to Washington theoretically and drop the scooter here and nobody cares. Or is that scooter supposed to be, housed or garaged in a certain city, or does it not matter where they go?
So spin gets to decide what to locate and where, and then their customers take them where they take them, and spin rearranges based on their philosophy.
But you could really theoretically just drive throughout the participating area within the county and.
Exactly. So in all approved service areas. So we worked with St. George to come up with that service area of where scooters can and cannot be parked, ridden, etc. Same thing will happen with Santa Clara as well. And then if chosen, able to operate here, the same sort of thing where we would want to make sure continuity sake, since we had, we've seen, as Rusty mentioned, a lot of app opens here for folks who clearly are wanting to ride. So yes, there would be continuity between 3 jurisdictions. But that said, as you mentioned, our team and Otto's team on the ground here would be able to monitor, each city has X amount of scooters. So, we don't want them all piling up in one city. So constantly rebalancing, which is honestly good for our business as well, because then you're acting on demand as well.
So one thing that because I know you're a tech company, that I would love to see if you have this type of data is in a year, could you show us like a circulation map for scooters, which scooters entered our city, where they came from and where they went? I just think that would be really interesting.
Yeah, we can.
So, and then one of the other conversations, I know we talked a little bit about prioritizing parking, but one of the conversations when this was first introduced to us was that you could use your app to actually teach your customers to maybe not leave them directly in the sidewalk or in people's driveways. It seems like that was a really big problem over in St. George. I think it probably still is. Is that something that's in the works or that you've already got done?
Yeah, so we have onboarding education screens for users. And so we can, format those to match exactly what St. George has or update them for maybe other specific needs that Washington City has as well. Additionally, daily in-app pop-ups or pop-ups every time a user opens an app. So then definitely friction points like that where we're able to add to educate. And additionally, we've been doing in-person, well, I guess digital the last year, but starting to do more in-person education with users as well. And so we'd be happy to coordinate on attending local events, farmers markets, that sort of thing. So folks are aware. I know that in person can also make a difference.
Also, one thing to add, all of the scooters will have a local text number on the bottom that can be read from far away. Those texts go directly to myself and the team, and we would typically respond within an hour to relocate any scooters that somebody reports. And you can also call that phone number, which just gets routed to our customer support team.
So, and I know you saying that you have the app and you can do that. What I'm not hearing from you is a commitment that you will.
We will.
Thank you.
So that was one of the other points, and I'm glad you brought up that there's a phone number on it. If we have 2-3 different scooter companies, that's tough for us to figure out where the problem is. So if there are problems, we'll know it's with Spin and we'll expect the responsiveness. They also do a really great job with, putting the number on the scooter, and then we'll have that at the city offices as well to give to residents if there's any problem areas. So.
Thank you. Any additional questions? I entertain a motion.
Before we get a motion, if I could, Mayor, just when the vote comes, I just want to express my concern about safety in general, just so everyone knows that I have a concern with safety all the way around. We can discuss it, but it's probably not going to make any difference. But just so you know my concern.
Thank you.
Mayor, I'm ready to make a motion. Okay. A motion to approve an agreement between Washington City and Spin Scooter with one condition, that being that 1 year from now, we get an update with MAP that designates and shows usage in Washington City.
In the 1-year contract.
And a 1-year contract also.
I'll second the motion. Staley?
Thank you. Motion and a second. We'll do a roll call vote.
Staley, aye.
Ward aye.
IVI.
Coates, aye.
Bundy, nay.
Okay, thank you. That's approved 4-1. Move on to item 10, report of officers from assigned committees. Anything to report, gentlemen?
Mayor, I actually do have something. It's not typical, but we've been actually having legislative policy meetings during this summer. And I've actually been asked to join 2 different committees. I want to share that with the council and with you, Mayor, just so that in case there's questions, you can reach out and I'd be happy to entertain those. The first committee that I joined is through the Legislative Policy Committee, and that is a general plan water integration committee that will discuss the need to include water in our general plans. It has projections and in some cases limitations. The other committee that I joined is a discussion about statewide fireworks. Apparently this year, because of the restrictions, they saw a huge increase, and I won't ask Chief Evans to respond to this, but it was a statewide improvement in fires and time served and expenditures for overtime for fires that occurred during that. So those 2 things. Just one other thing I'll mention, inclusionary zoning discussion is ongoing. That is a discussion basically all on its own. And then more recently, HB 1003, which has to do with plan reviews and times that cities have to return plans and do plan reviews and inspections. That is progressing as well. And then the only other comment I have is just make a note that Ironman has been changed from 2 days to 1, just so we understand that. I don't know who's going to cry about it, but Ironman is just 1 day, September 18th, and it will impact downtown of Washington City and along Telegraph and Washington Parkway.
Councilman Ivy, is the fireworks committee, was your comment stating that because of the closures, they have concluded that there were less fires?
They very much like the fact that there was less fires, and they're trying to find that fine line between allowing them but not creating any dangers. And of course, my position will be that we as a city can address those better than the state can or the county. But I think they're just looking for some commonality in the language to determine those issues.
So this committee is looking at state law on fireworks?
That is correct.
Thank you. Anybody else? Not, we'll go to city manager report.
I just have brief, Mayor.
Okay.
So with Active Transportation Committee, it's fun. They're working on a paper trail map that's nearing completion. And so it's neat to see all of our trails starting to connect and come about. And so that's something that they want to have done for this fall with the Ironman and all the other events, so that people can, and of course it'll be outdated in a year from now, but for right now, it's been a task that that they've been working on. They're also just one of the things that the committee and myself, we're just very appreciative of Public Works with all the summer slurry projects. The committee is really appreciative of the bike lanes on both Washington Fields Road and on the Washington Dam Road, and it just makes a real difference working together. So they wanted me to express that appreciation to Public Works for that.
Thank you, Councilman. Okay, we'll go. Anybody else? City manager report.
I don't have anything additional to report tonight, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Move on to a closed session. We do have to discuss purchase, exchange, or lease of property. So I'll entertain a motion to adjourn to the closed session.
So moved, Mayor.
Bundy, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Take a 5-minute break.